I don't know about you, but I don't really like admitting whenever I've made a mistake. And I found that there are 5 very common mistakes that I see podcasters making in their podcast business that we really need to talk about today. So let's get right to it. Hey y'all, Krystal here today, and I'm totally gonna nerd out on you for a second because I love making presentations. It's actually something I wish I had more time. Like I wish I could make a formal presentation every single time I do one of my videos, but it just time gets away from me and I don't always have a chance to do it. But I did today. So I'm going to share with you the 5 common mistakes that I see so many new podcasters make whenever they're trying to either pivot their podcast into a business or they're trying to incorporate a podcast into an existing business. And this can really make or break the success of you really having a show that you love and you can monetize and you're excited about, and one that drags you down every single week and you eventually lead to burnout, which I do not want that to happen. So please stick around so you learn from all of these mistakes, and hopefully you walk away from this little mini training today knowing exactly what your next steps are or which ones to avoid in the future if you happen to come across any of these. Okay, so we're on board, we're ready to go. If you're like brand new here, if you've never been a part of any of my trainings, hello, welcome. I'm Krystal. I teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. Sorry, I didn't formally introduce myself, and I felt like this was like that perfect time to add that in. So welcome to this craziness in one of my mini trainings. So let's get right to it. So common mistakes that brand new podcasters tend to make with their podcast business, but also existing business owners and people that are like, man, I got this. I know exactly what I'm doing. I see a lot of you making these same mistakes too. So pay attention, grab your notebook if you're going to take some notes, because we are going to dive into the first one, and that is you are too broad. You are way too broad, whether it is your audience, right? You're like, I want to talk to everybody. Don't do that. Learn from my mistakes that does not work. It is way too general to just say, I want to have a podcast that speaks to everybody under the sun. You need to niche down your topic and actually focus on a specific demographic or a type of person who is very specific to the content that you are creating. So do not go too broad. It's one of the things that I did in the beginning, and learn from my mistake, please. The next one is your message doesn't flow if you're too broad. So here's a great example. I used to have a blog, and on this blog, I would talk about way too many different things. I talked about parenting. I talked a little bit about marriage. I talked a little bit about my own journey of weight loss. I talked about just writing. I talked about trying to publish a book. Like there were just so many things that didn't naturally sit well together for me to say, like someone to say, oh, Krystal, she's the girl that talks about. There wasn't like a fill in the blank that was very clear. It was all over the place. So don't go too broad with your message to where it doesn't all flow together. Today, I speak about podcasting and having an online business. Like those two things mesh really well together and they flow very naturally one into the other. Everything else didn't work that well before. So don't go too broad with your message. Too many topics. Okay, so too many topics is another way for you to be too broad with your overall message, but it can also distract listeners if you're creating a podcast or a video or maybe even a blog that has way too many things shoved into it, right? You're trying to talk about writing and parenting and doing all these other things into like too many things are shoved. Like I imagine like an overflowing suitcase that you can't quite, like you're sitting on top of it. You've done this before, right? You're trying to get home from your vacation and you bought too many things at the souvenir shop or like last minute. You're like, all these things, I swear they fit into my suitcase before. You're sitting on top of it and you're trying to zip it up and you're trying to shove everything in. Don't do that with your content. That will overwhelm your audience. And that is to my third point, is not being specific enough because you've shoved everything in there. Don't make a podcast episode an hour long whenever it could be 15 minutes. Okay, so don't go too broad. Don't be too generic. You need to be more specific with your content. That way you don't make these mistakes whenever you're actually turning the content for your podcast into a business opportunity. So the next one, you're not consistent. Oh, this is a mistake that really just gets under my skin. It really bothers me. And the first one is infrequency, right? You are not posting enough whenever it comes to your podcast, or you're not publishing your content often enough. You're like very scattered. And there is a very big difference when people say, do I have to publish every single week? And someone says, I can't do it. I can't make it happen. That is fine if you're only going to publish once or twice a month, but you still have to do it. This is the big difference. When somebody comes to me and says, I want to do this, but I'm trying to do all these other things and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that's fine. But if you say you're going to show up every single Monday, like the first Monday of the month, you better have a piece of content on the first Monday of the month. Or if you're going to show up every single Tuesday, have a brand new piece of content, show up every single Tuesday, no matter what. And there's another point that I'm going to come to in a second that has to do with recycling content. I'm not a huge fan of that either in the way that I see a lot of podcasters doing it. But the other thing is you're inconsistent with the messaging. Now, this kind of goes back to being too broad, but we'll talk about one thing on your, let's say social media profile, but then your podcast says something different. Or maybe you're like, I stand for this on my social media, but then you go to your podcast and you're like, wait, you're kind of contradicting yourself, or you're not, it's not consistent. It doesn't flow well from one to the other. So you've got to get your consistency down, because it's going to make you show up more professional as a podcast business owner. And it's just going to have people have that clear fill in the blank moment. I'm going to go to Krystal because she's an expert in fill in the blank, right? This is what you want. Insert your name, right? I'm going to go to insert your name. You can say your name out loud, or you can just, you don't have to talk about it. It's okay. It's okay. Let's just go back. Insert name here is the expert in, and then you would insert your topic. That is how you do that, by being consistent. But if you're not consistent, it's a mistake, and your podcast business may not grow the way that you want it to in the amount of time that you want it to, because it's not consistent. Okay, I'm going to step off my high horse on that one because it really bothers me, gets under my skin, but okay, we're moving on. The next one is you plateau. I see this, it's so common, and I don't think enough people talk about it. I've experienced this many times, many times. I've kind of gone, with my stats, with my audience, I go and then I plateau. And two of the main reasons why I see new podcasters, existing podcasters, people pivoting into podcasting, how they plateau is, one, they feel like they can't reach new people. Now, this happens when you're trying to share the same message over and over and over again to the exact same people. It's kind of like driving past the same billboard, and then it's a blur in your imagination. You're like, I'm on autopilot whenever I drive now, and I've seen that billboard a million times. I don't even notice it anymore. I don't even know what it says. That's kind of the same thing. If you're talking to the same people over and over again and you're sharing the same message, then you are going to plateau with your content. So if you are boring your listeners, that's another way that people are actually going to leave. So you're not just going to plateau, but people actually may leave and say, I don't need that content anymore. I've either grown out of it, or it's just not exactly what I need anymore, then you will either plateau or actually decline in what you're doing. So the way that you can avoid this is by constantly looking for new opportunities to get in front of a fresh audience. But also, I was talking about this earlier. I'm going to come back to I'm going to share with you a way that people can be very off with their messaging. Please, please, please. This is another pet peeve of mine. I may get some, flack for saying this, but don't repost old podcast episodes. I don't like this. I'm not a fan of this simply because people have already heard it. If people are around for a while and then you're like, you know what, I'm just going to air the same episode. We're going to do a revisited episode. We're just going to air it again. Don't do that. Please don't. I think that this is a really fast way for you to plateau because people are going to say, oh, well, if they're going to do that, in my opinion, it's lazy whenever you could just record a quick 5-minute, 10-minute episode and say, hey, we are in the works of creating some brand new content. Let me share a few quick tips with you, or let me share with you some behind the scenes or something along those lines. I don't like you sharing the same piece of content that you've already published simply because your audience is going to have it in their mind that's like, well, I missed a week of the podcast, but it's okay because they just reshared the same thing. I'm just going to go do something else. They will get out of the habit of listening to you on a regular basis if you keep serving them the same thing over and over again. You are boring your listeners if you are still just talking about the same thing all the time and not giving them something new. It's actually one of the reasons why we're doing this mini training today, because I was like, you know what? We need to spice things up a little bit. We need to change it up because I don't do a lot of these mini trainings here on this channel. I do them in my live presentations. I do them in our Facebook group. You can learn more about our Facebook group right here and in the link below. But I just want to do something different. I don't want to plateau. And the way to do that is to keep things interesting. So don't plateau in your podcast business. Okay, next mistake that I see. You are chasing only downloads. Y'all, this is a huge, huge, huge mistake. You will not have a deep connection with your audience and you are just going after ads revenue. I see this a lot. It's like, oh, what's the fastest way to get to 1 million downloads? How can I get to my first 1,000 downloads? How can I get to my first 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, like whatever it is? I see a lot of podcasters immediately after a number. And then if they don't hit that number in the first month, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is of their podcast journey, they're so discouraged. And it makes me sad for them because it's kind of like chasing money, right? If you are just constantly chasing money and you don't have a depth to you, right? Like if that's all, like it's someone that's materialistic, right? It's the same thing. It's like you're only like skin deep, like there's nothing below the surface. That's kind of how your audience will feel about the connection with you. If you don't take time to cultivate those connections, like actually create engagement, whether it's on social media, your email list, or in other ways, then that's all you're going to have. You're going to have a bunch of downloads, but whenever you go to sell something to your audience, they're not going to have a loyalty to you. They're not going to have a reason to sign up for your live event or, buy your digital course or sign up for your membership because they don't really have a connection with you. They just know you as someone they listen to and then they move on to the next podcast as soon as yours is done. So don't just go chasing the ad revenue money because let's be honest, you're going to have millions of downloads in order to attract a lot of ad companies that are out there anyway. So don't just chase downloads. If you're just getting started, or even if you've been in this a while and this is a mistake you've made from the beginning, it's okay. You can always course correct and make it more about your audience, but don't just chase downloads. This is a very common mistake that I see so many podcasters making, and I would love to see you start cultivating those relationships with your audience instead of just focusing on those download numbers. Okay, the fifth mistake that I see so often is the wrong strategy. Y'all, I see this all the time. People are frustrated because their podcast isn't growing, probably because they're just not consistent. They're too broad. They've plateaued. They're only focusing on numbers. So they're frustrated. And I get it. I've been there too, where I'm just like, why is this not picking up the way that I thought it would? I thought that I could just publish and then like all the downloads would just start coming in and I'd just be seeing like my podcast skyrocket to the top of the charts. That's not how it works. If you didn't know this, that's not how it works. At least it's not how it worked for me. It's not how it worked for most people that I know, that I have worked with. So if you're frustrated with slow growth, then maybe you have the wrong strategy. Or maybe the monetization strategy that you tried just isn't working. Maybe you were like, I was going to work with these brands, but they just don't seem to be seeing eye to eye with how much I'm pricing my ads at. Or I really wanted to try affiliate marketing, but it's just not working for my content. It's falling flat. Or I tried to do this membership and it wasn't working for me. Maybe you have the wrong strategy. And instead of just saying, I quit, this isn't going to work for me, let's pivot and figure out what exactly it is, like where you should make changes. But the last part of this is I see a lot of podcast business owners that are terrified. They're so afraid to start marketing their own products or services. And that's actually what I really, really wanted to hone in on today, because this is my favorite part of podcasting. I love the idea of being able to grow and build and nurture an audience that's excited to hear what you have to say, that loves connecting with you every single week. And honestly, they are sitting by their phones or whatever devices they're listening to your podcast and they're saying, oh my gosh, like where's their next episode? I cannot wait to listen to it. And then you tell them about this product or this service that you created that is specifically for them. And they're like, where do I sign up? That is the strategy that I want podcasters adopting more. Creating your own products, creating your own services, creating memberships, creating books, events, courses, whatever that looks like for you and your podcast business. But if you have the wrong strategy or you've made any of these other mistakes, there's always time to course correct and change things up. And actually, one of my mentors, Marie Forleo, is in the middle of doing a free video training series that I think will help you. She's actually releasing 3 videos over the next few weeks that are going to be really helpful if you're just getting started in having an online business, creating your podcast business, or you're just like, I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't want to make any of these mistakes again or in the future. I really want you to go check out this video series. You'll find the link here on the screen as well as in the description below. But this video series is actually super helpful to help you understand exactly what you need to do in order to set up your online business for success. She talks a little bit about having a great passion and a great purpose behind what your business is, but also the tactical steps of having a website that doesn't suck and being able to really connect with your audience from the get-go and not have a whole bunch of distractions that's too broad and not consistent. And she will absolutely help you have a better understanding of what your goals are and how to reach them. So make sure you go check them out. Here's the link right here to check out this free video training series. It will be linked below in the description as well. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video, subscribe below if you have not already. Make sure you check out these other videos right here, all about podcasting and running your online business. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.